I am unashamed. What about you?
Welcome back to Unashamed. Dad, you're itching to tell us something, Dad. What is it?
Well, I was surprised at a guy that he said, I've been waiting on this moment for 45 years. That's when I made the decision, but I'm just now carrying it out. And I said, what's that? He said, to be baptized. He said, especially after I just listened to them texts you were giving.
So you did your class yesterday.
John 3.
I was there yesterday, and look, what's crazy is I bumped into him post-baptism.
Really?
Yeah, and he told me the story that you're fixing to tell. And he was gleaming, Phil.
Yeah. Well, you tell the story because I get so many.
At this stage of your life. Well,
coming and going,
and you hurt your back again, which I haven't heard the details on that. And you don't know how you hurt it, right?
Have no idea.
You just woke up?
It just started aching when I got up, and I said, Yeah. And it got worse and worse and worse till right now. I'm sitting here. I'm perfectly comfortable right now. But if I move my legs to walk over there and get a cup of coffee, I mean, with each step, it's like you got a knife in your back.
Yeah. So I will give you credit and you felt this way yesterday, but you still managed to make the drive. And
I said, I'll go down to the baptismal pool with you, my man, and that's the best move you ever make. He said, I've been working on it for 45 years.
Yeah.
But I got to listening to y'all, and he said, I said, you know what? I better move on that.
Yeah.
So
you witnessed the baptism.
I told Jersey Joe, I said, baptize just when I said, because with my back, I do pretty good, but I can't lift a fountain pen, much less a man.
Well, right. And you don't want him to die and be buried and then
stay buried.
Not be raised.
I'm telling you, I said, that's the smartest move. You know, you read that John 3, I mean, it said, unless a man is born again of water and the Spirit, he can't see.
Isn't that something how Jesus, I mean, he announces that and everybody's looking around like, what's he talking about? Being born again. I mean, here's God in human form introducing this idea of new creation
to
his Spirit.
He compared the Spirit when you receive the Spirit when you're baptized. When he mentions that, people say the Spirit,
like the wind.
Like the wind. He says, like the wind. You don't know where it's coming from or where it's going. It just comes by. The wind comes by.
You know what's crazy is about 3 or 4.
That's the way the Spirit is. Well, that's pretty cool, really.
3 or 4 people at church yesterday asked me, they're like, we haven't seen you in a while. And I said, well, I'm like the wind, you know. But I was thinking of that same passage, which was kind of funny. No, that was cause for celebration yesterday. And good job, even despite your suffering. We were kind of on a high because we went to the Washita Christian School, which, Phil, you were a part of at the Roots. And I didn't even realize this. So, Al, they had a 50-year celebration, which I noticed turned into them giving a pitch for the next 50 years.
Oh, yeah.
So, which was very clever. And it was a very good presentation. And look, you know, usually if I don't like something, I don't talk about it. But I was very impressed because the number one thing that came out of that presentation, which, by the way, Phil, there were hundreds of people there, and a lot of the original dreamers who started the school in a living room were there. I mean, I don't know how old they were. Old. One of the guys, J.J. Turner, who was part of that original, him and his wife, and then my wife's parents, who my wife's mom wrote the alma mater song for Washita Christian, and they started the program with Coach Michael Harper, who's been there for years.
Well, Jase, your mother-in-law was my teacher because whenever Dad taught 2 years there, and in the first year it started in 1974. Dad came in 75 as a brand new, dripping wet Christian. And But Peggy, your mother-in-law, was one of my teachers, and not one of my favorites. She is now, but when you're a kid, just a
at
little
the
different.
time they were like children in the 6th and 7th grade, just junior high.
Yeah.
That's about as old as they were. All them, and I just watched them grow up over the last 40 years, and it's been
50
pretty
years.
interesting to watch.
You were my dad. You were my homeroom teacher in the 5th and 6th grade.
Yeah.
So my formative years. It was just funny. Now my grandson is the same age, and I don't know. You look back, you think, man, what happened to 50 years?
Well, it was weird because they asked all the people who had gone to school there to stand up. Well, I stood up because people didn't realize that I actually went to OCS in the 2nd grade, and it was I think it was at Forsyth. What they did for the first 2 or 3 years is they met at churches. At churches.
Yeah.
And they eventually got the property where they are now. But it was really good. But one of the MCs was Grant Taylor, who we all know. You may not know out in that world, but he worked for Duck Commander and Buck Commander for years, and he's really good with a microphone. But he made a comment because I noticed, which when Missy reminded me that I had agreed to go to this function, I said, well, whoever scheduled... It
doesn't sound like you still were wanting to go to this function when she reminded you.
But she was right, once again, because she's like, no, you agreed to come with a good attitude.
It was the groundwork for a school, and they were paying very big bucks. Is the reason I did it. $500 a month.
Oh yeah, and it's still a problem. Look, they make half the teachers that
$500 a month. I said, hey,
look, you talking about servants? They make half the money that public schools make. But what I said is why it was so good is they focused on Jesus, and these people are out there, and they try to give these kids a Christian education in this world, which seems like genius right now. And it was an awesome event, but I wanted to say something that Grant said because I leaned over to Missy and I was like, well, whoever lined this up on the LSU bye week needs a raise. Because I thought they strategically did that. And so Grant made a comment. He's like, I appreciate y'all being here in his opening comments. And he said, and you missing college football. And he said, I'm pretty sure you're not missing much. And so I say that to say this, when we get home, the first thing I do is check all the scores that I missed, even though LSU wasn't playing. And I looked at my computer and I said, well, this can't be right. It actually has Vanderbilt with a bigger number beside the school than it does Alabama. I was like, there's no way this can be right. There has been some kind of worm that has got in the internet. I could not believe what I was seeing.
You couldn't wrap your mind around Vandy beating Bama.
I clicked on it, and they had the highlights. I thought, I don't believe you. I have to watch the highlights. So I watched the highlight. So I get up, and Missy, she's a football fan, and we enjoy it together, but she's not hardcore if it's not something related to Louisiana. But I just had to go tell someone. I mean, it felt like when I realized what I have in Jesus, when you kind of have that moment where like, I can't keep this silent. I go in there and I'll say, babe, you're not going to believe this. And she's like, what? Because we had just done the OCS thing and she was thinking it was something spiritual. And I said, Vanderbilt beat Alabama. And she said, I don't believe you. I was like, no, it's a fact. I've researched it. No word. Well, look, she just exploded. She's not a big college football fan. She just exploded in joy. She's like, woohoo.
Now we know she's a true LSU fan. That's for sure.
And I said, you know what I have to do in this moment? She said, what? I said, I got to send Grant Taylor a message because he misspoke. When he said, I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure you're not missing much.
Yeah.
And so I sent him the text and said, you remember when you said you're not missing much? Well, Vanderbilt beat Alabama. And he said, yeah, I just saw that. You have a point. So what's interesting now, I want to finish this story. So then Sunday we heard a sermon by Darren Whitehead from Church of the City of Nashville. And that was his opening line because they're in Nashville.
Oh, yeah.
And he's from Australia. It was really funny. And he's like, look, I don't know if y'all noticed last night, but there were a few thousand, he made some reference to, they had probably had a few adult beverages.
Mm-hmm.
College kids carrying a goalpost down the middle of downtown Nashville. He said last night into the night. And he said, look, being from Australia, when Australians do things like that, they call the police. They're breaking the law. But nobody seemed to have a problem with it, which they eventually dumped the goalposts in the lake.
In the river, probably.
Yeah, that's how it ended. And so I just thought back to something that the famous coach Nick Saban had said a couple weeks ago that became bulletin board material. And he said it was hard to play in the SEC because every time you're on the road, it's difficult to win in the SEC when you're on the road. He said, except for Vanderbilt. So actually, in a weird way, he actually contributed to that loss.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you need to worry when you're on the road in SEC, but not when you go to Vanderbilt. And then it was the first time ever that Vanderbilt had beaten a top 5 team. So I just had to share that.
Well, I'm glad you did, because we have one of our favorite people is going to be on the podcast today. He happens to be a huge Alabama fan, if I remember correctly. So we're going to get his take on that.
I'm not so sure about that, Al. He was born in Alabama, and this will be the riddle if you can figure out who our guest is. He was born in Alabama, if I recall, but he's been living in Georgia for years.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where we're at on that.
I think you can get the man out of Alabama, but you never get Alabama out of the man. That's my prediction. So we're going to find out. Let's take a break. We come back. We'll have Jase introduce one of our favorite people on the planet. So we'll see him after the break. So Jase, I think when we can, we love to support businesses that love America. You can't always do that. Sometimes you get into a situation, but that's what we love to try to do.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's products that you want to use, and especially in our cell phone world, you have multiple options, but you also want to know what you're contributing to. So with Patriot Mobile, you can give us the specifics on where your money's actually going.
They've been around for over 10 years. They're America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. They offer dependable nationwide coverage. They give you the ability to access all 3 major networks. And so you really can support these guys, but also you don't have to fund the left to get your cell phone coverage. When you switch to Patriot Mobile, you let everybody know you support free speech, religious freedom, sanctity of life. They support the Second Amendment, supporters of our military, our veterans, and our first responders. If that's not enough, they also have a 100% U.S.-based customer service team that makes switching to Patriot Mobile easy. You can keep your number and your phone or upgrade. They'll help you find the best deals and the best plan that fits your needs. Just go to patriotmobile.com/Phil, or you can call them at 972-PATRIOT. Right now, you get a free month when you use the offer code PHIL. So join us, switch to America's only Christian conservative mobile provider, Patriot Mobile, by going to patriotmobile.com/Phil, or you can call them at 972-PATRIOT for your free month of service today. Welcome back to Unashamed. We have one of our favorite people, Mac Powell. When we first met Mac, he was you were with Third Day back in those days, Mac. And
that's right.
It was really interesting. So we have confirmed that Mac is an Alabama fan. So we hated that we brought you into the podcast in such a terrible way by inflicting more pain into the Vandy law. Yeah. So what were you doing? Were you just in shock like the rest of Bama Nation watching the game?
Well, in a way I was in shock. In a way I wasn't, because I've read this story and seen this story many, many times in the past. Even with Nick Saban being the greatest coach of all time, he only, of the 17 years he was at Alabama, only 2 of the seasons were undefeated. So more than likely, you're going to get a loss sometime. Yeah. I just wasn't thinking it was going to be the Vandy. So yeah, it was tough. And what's interesting, and I say this not to make y'all feel bad, but just to kind of give you some insight. Yesterday, yesterday was the 1 year anniversary of my dad passing away. And he was a huge Alabama fan, and he passed that on to me, unfortunately. But I was getting texts all day from people saying, hey, man, just checking in on you, hoping you're okay. And I thought, man, how does everybody remember? That's so kind of them. And then I went, oh, they're not checking on me about my daddy. They're checking about the Alabama game.
So is your dad, did your parents still stay on in Alabama in was it Tilton County?
Tilton County, right in Clanton, right in the middle of the state, right between Birmingham and Montgomery. I tell people when they say, where's Clanton, Alabama? I says, where people stop to get gas on the way to Florida. But it's
well, you're not believe this, Mac. So Lisa and I, a month ago, we went and spoke in Clanton, Alabama. And I had no idea you were from there. And so we go there. And so we're coming up from Gulf Shores because we have our southern lair down here that we stay at part of the time. And so we're driving up there, and I got it on the GPS and where we're going. And we're speaking on behalf of a pregnancy center, a CareNet pregnancy center. It's their fundraiser. So we get off the interstate. We get off at 65, and we're going and we're driving, and we're getting now we're in a pasture. And I'm like, well, there's no way this event can be. I mean, literally, I'm on a dirt road going over a cattle guard. And as soon as we come over the hill, there's this place right out there. It was called the Back Porch. And some guy has built a little thing, kind of like Jay's and Missy's thing, where they have events at. And that's where it was. And we parked on the side of a hill at just about a 90-degree angle. I was afraid my truck was going to roll off down to the woods. It is the most interesting and unique event center I've ever spoken at. But the people were fantastic. So I wish I had known. I had no idea you were from there because I could have said, hey, I know the most famous person, from Clanton, Alabama.
Most of them would have been like, who's that? I actually played Clanton for the first time in my life about a month ago, and it was a men's event. And y'all know Rick Burgess, our good friend. Oh yeah, Rick Burgess on Rick and Bubba, and he wasn't there, but his ministry was doing an event, and I was there to sing. And man, I was scared to death because I thought, man, I'd never done this. I've never sang at home. I don't know if anybody's going to show up. And it was so fun, man, seeing all these people that I went to high school with that are 50 plus years old now, and I'm looking at them going, do I look that old now? So, it happens.
I was wondering because, there's a famous verse in the Bible when Jesus went to his hometown. He was like, no prophet.
A prophet is not welcome.
Yeah, because, most of the events we've done in our hometowns, I'm not going to lie, it's been crickets. Because I think they all know you. And
right.
So I think
they see you at the grocery store, so it's like, what's the big deal?
What's the big deal? So I think everybody needs that humble pie from time to time. But
fortunately, it wasn't just a show for me. It was an event, so there were a lot of people there. It was awesome. It was about 500 men just praising the Lord and lifting their hands to the Lord. It was awesome.
Well, actually, Mac, the first time that I met you, Dad and I were out in Anaheim, California. And Greg Laurie had the big thing at Anaheim Stadium. They does.
I remember that
every year. You guys were singing.
How many years are we going back here, Al?
We're probably talking 15, maybe.
Yeah,
Mac,
at least
something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And so we're down. So you're in the baseball stadium. So we're kind of down in the bowels of the stadium, Jay. So we're down there. We're like where the players get dressed and stuff. And they're like, here's these guys' third day. And I was like, oh, and so we're shaking hands. And Mac's like, oh, man, I'm a big fan of the show. And, we appreciate what you guys are doing. And so Dad did an interview, and I got to pray. And when I walked out there, of course, you guys had these experiences, but not me. And I walk out on that baseball stadium, there's 45,000 people there. And they say, Al Robertson, oldest son from Duck Dynasty. And everybody, gives a standing ovation. And I'm just doing the prayer.
In California.
In California.
California.
This is a
Exactly.
miracle. You're
It is.
out with. Okay, go ahead.
It was a miracle.
That's awesome. Well, let me tell you how this got started. I want to apologize because, Matt, we've actually been friends for years and we've never had you on the podcast. I was shocked when I heard that.
It should have already.
Yeah.
And I was actually studying for the podcast, and you know how the little algorithms come up? I was listening to a sermon, and for some reason, the internet knew me, I guess, better than the podcast people, because it put up, you had a new song on my little algorithm. And I was like, oh, Matt's got some new stuff going out. And I listened to one of the songs, and I loved it. And that took me back to how we met because, you know, I struggled when I came to Christ marrying a woman who is very musical. And Missy, I think y'all have done some things at same events and where she sang and y'all sang and we had all this. Well, I was like a deer in the headlights because I was only there to share Jesus and blow duck calls in that order. But I was around y'all. And I remember the day that she said, look, you would like his music. Because the problem I had with back then, 15, 20 years ago, with contemporary music is I came from Phil's musical acumen, which was Pink Floyd, Leonard Skinner. And even though we were in Jesus, that's just what he listened to. And when we were in the shop building duck calls, we were listening to Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Yeah.
Eagles.
I finally got out of there after about 30 years.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you were influencing me because when Missy was like, oh, listen, you have all
My
this.
conversion didn't factor in the bunch you just said, the bunch of the.
No, exactly. And so, and I remember the first time, because she introduced me to Third Day and Mac Powell, and I listened to it, and I thought, well, where's this been all my Christian life, you know? And, but since I've known you now, it also made me really appreciate what you do because you are true to yourself, and it's different in the Christian world, but for people who come out of the world, and especially we qualify that with 10 exclamation points, this was like, okay, this is not cheesy, and I love the vibe. So I think it was a connection there with, you know, from our show with Duck Dynasty. God kind of had an idea that was kind of outside the norm with reaching people with our family. So that was that instant connection. And so we did a few things back early on. But when I heard that, I want to say this because when I saw that new song, I called you up and I was embarrassed because we haven't talked in a couple years. Yeah, I think I saw you somewhere at an event. We were together.
You probably saw him at the K-Love Awards. I don't know if I didn't get to talk to you, Mike, but Jace may have. But when we got Podcast of the Year, this was last year, you were singing, and you were singing, what was the song you sang? New Creation. Yeah, and you were the first one up, and Jason Crabb was singing it with you.
That's right.
And I got to say, I mean, there was a lot of great stuff that night. I mean, a lot of great artists, obviously, beautiful music. But yours was my favorite. One is because I love the song, and it's so much what we're about. But just the you guys had like a little set on stage. You had like, it was a little church setting. You had the people in the pews, and you were up front, and so you were singing the psalm. It's like you're preaching a sermon, and it was just really, really good. So I don't know, Jace, but you may have saw him there. I'm not sure. So Jace, are you much of a reader? Do you read a lot of? I mean, I know we do a lot of Bible study for the podcast, but do you like to just read magazines or books?
Not really, but you took my answer because I do read the Bible a lot. But occasionally, if I'm around a coffee table, I'll pick one up and look at it.
So I love to read, but they say people don't read as much as they used to. I don't know if that's true or not, but our good friends at Blaze have a new quarterly magazine called Frontier. And I just happened to have it this past weekend and read through it. It's a very beautiful magazine. It's very well done. Has a lot of thoughtful commentary. The photography in it is really nice. Because we have a lot of journalists, obviously, that work at Blaze, and so and they're connected to a lot of people. Chris Rufo, who's one of my favorites, has an article in their initial magazine in Frontier. Mark Levin, Glenn Beck, of course. But it's just the beginning. So when you sign up with Blaze, part of the Blaze Unlimited membership, you get exclusive access to Frontiers delivered right to your front door. They're taking another step forward in fighting against the state-run media and propaganda. So it's a great way to get good information out of good writers. As a founding member of Blaze Unlimited, you'll receive a limited edition founding members card, even more behind-the-scenes content, VIP event access, and here's the big one, the chance to have your voice heard. This membership is about more than sitting on the sidelines. It's about actively joining the mission to defend free speech and uphold the American way of life. So if you're ready to take the next step in this fight, go to blazeunlimited.com/unashamed to claim your spot. But don't wait. Founding member spots are limited. Let's stand together, push back, keep the spirit of America alive. Join Blaze Unlimited today. Go to blazeunlimited.com/unashamed. That's blazeunlimited.com/unashamed.
And so before we let you talk, I'm kind of introducing, what you do, because we really love what you do. But I called you and you answered, which was shocking. I was going to send you a text.
Well, I was reading the word. I'm not lying. I was reading the word. I usually in the morning I get up and I walk for about an hour and I pray during that walk. And then when I get home, I opened the word, and I was about halfway through my time in the word, and you called, and I said, I better get this, because he don't call me often, so I better grab it while I can.
I was fixing to share that, and you were reading John 13, and we got into it. You started preaching on what you were reading, which was awesome, talking about how Jesus being a servant is so contagious in our own lives, and you were just having a realization of that. And and really it's the epitome of how our relationship began, because I know you remember this. My son was featured on one of the episodes in Duck Dynasty, and they wanted him to sing, but he didn't have a band. He was just like, he had the ability to sing, and they thought it was a cool idea. And somehow or another, y'all on just a fly-by-the-night phone call drove, I don't know how many hours, to Monroe, and y'all acted as his band on. There's an episode of Duck Dynasty, which we thought, this will be great for you. People will see you on this show. And after all the edit, I think that segment was maybe 10 seconds.
Welcome to my world, man.
And I felt so horrible. Y'all had been touring somewhere, drove all night to be there, stayed all day to do this scene, and it came out to about 10 seconds, and it was like, well, thank you for that. Awesome.
No, you know what? It was fun to be able to do it anyway. And it's not, sometimes it's not even about doing the event. It's about saying that you got to do the event. So I've told more people that I got to be on an episode of Duck Dynasty than probably ever saw it. So, what was the thing I remember most about that is, we're driving, I don't know, I'm guessing a 6 or 7 hour drive from Atlanta. I've got my band, and we're in the van and the trailer, and we got all our gear. And I call Missy to say, hey, tell me a little bit about, can you connect me with whoever's running the sound so we can, give them some information? And she said, what? And I said, the people who have the sound system. And she said, I thought y'all had that stuff. And I said, no, we don't have a sound system. We're a band. We show up and we plug into what's there. So she said, let me call you right back. So she had to scramble around to find a sound system somewhere.
Oh, this is getting more embarrassing. I have felt
big time television, folks. This is national television.
Yeah, so I felt bad about that for years, and I've always loved what y'all do. That's why. So I asked you. I was like, you got a new album. Will you be on our podcast? Because I want people to hear this. And it was such a transformational moment for me, because it really introduced me into contemporary Christian music, which now I love. I know y'all are doing a tour now, and you've fit this into your busy schedule. And I think it's called the Awakening Tour. Is that right?
That's right. The Awakening Tour. It's an amazing tour. It just started this past week. We were down in Florida for most of the shows. It's Casting Crowns, my good friends that are also live in Atlanta, south of Atlanta. A band called We the Kingdom. If you haven't heard We the Kingdom, you got to go check them out. They're awesome. A bunch of great artists, and man, what an honor to be.
Katie Nicole,
and Katie Nicole, and who else is somebody else?
Tyrion, I think.
Tyrion, that's right. Who's Toby Mac has kind of brought her up. She's on Toby's label. A lot of great artists. And David Leonard, our good friend from good old boy from Arkansas.
Oh, yeah, it's a great night. Yeah,
he's awesome. A great worship leader, and just when you got, for me, I'm still a fan after all these years. I'm a fan of Christian music. When I see people that want to share their faith through music, I mean, it's inspiring. And so, to be part of a night like that is a beautiful thing. You go out and you see thousands of people lifting their hands, praising the Lord. To me, there's not a lot better than that. People sharing their testimonies on stage, people sharing the word on stage. So it doesn't get a lot better. I love it.
No, and you have a lot of fun doing it. There was a moment that happened somewhere in the Duck Dynasty years where you did a concert actually in our hometown, which was way more well received than our experiences. And I think you had an idea. You're like, why don't you get up on stage and play with us? And I'm like, well, Mac, I don't know how to play a guitar. Because I thought you thought, well, since I'm married to my wife, you must know something about music. But I didn't. And he's like, oh no, we'll take care of that. We'll just have you unplugged.
Yeah.
He's like, you're an actor. You can figure it out. And I was like, I'm really not an actor. So look, through the years, I have had.
This is like a Barney Fife episode, Jace. You remember when Barney was singing and they unplugged his mic so they couldn't hear him? You're Barney Fife now.
I literally was Barney Fife for Third Day with a guitar. Yeah. And look, my performance was so believable. Mac, I've never told you this. For years in airports, people come up, they talk about the Duck Show, and they talk about the podcast, they talk about our family. And then a number of people have said, "How are you still with Third Day?" one act with me with a guitar that wasn't plugged in, and it got on the internet, and somehow or another I've been commenting on how Third Day's going.
Hey man, see, it ain't hard to make it in the music business. It ain't hard.
Just gotta attach yourself to some talented people.
Yeah,
that's what's gotta happen.
Yeah, there's that, and fake it till you make it. You just get up there with an unplugged guitar. I saw Garth Brooks one time, and he was up there. He's about to do a song by himself and the band left, and he said, "I gotta be honest with y'all. This guitar ain't even plugged in. I just use it to cover up my gut."
Oh my goodness! So look,
we played home, Sweet Home Alabama. I remember that.
Yeah, we did. And I was like, now that I can pantomime.
Fake your way through it.
I didn't know you could fake that much material and get away with it.
You can fake it.
Are you kidding?
And look,
that's just his whole life.
The crowd went crazy. I mean, they went nuts. It's like we got Mac Powell Third Day, all these Christian people combined with our Duck Show playing Sweet Home Alabama in Louisiana. You would have thought that would have never worked.
Well, they probably thought, if they're with him, they've got to be great. They're
cooler than we thought. Jace can play a guitar. It was so funny. I kept wondering.
You're a little more bold than I am. I never would have got in a situation like that.
I just went with it and thought the Lord will work it out.
Hey.
But so what's fascinating, the reason I think that this encounter, you've been on the podcast and the tour that you're doing and your new album, which, I mean, just think about it. The name of it is I Love Jesus, which is why I think it works for you. You have these simple things that are, phrases that we get from the Bible, but that are really so profound. I mean, just think about it. You went new creations, and now I love Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, that I can understand, rally behind, and support 100%. So
and the new one, good news. I mean, that's just like so simple and yet so profound.
Exactly. So the day after, Mac, we had that conversation and you agreed to do it. I'm not making this up. I know this seems like a made up Jay story. My daughter, who is 21, and she's helping lead worship at a church in Nashville for the college age. And I'm just super excited for her faith and the things she's doing. She sends
Praise the
my
Lord.
wife a text because my daughter's unaware that this was going on. And
Yeah.
she's like, Mom, you need to listen to this band that is awesome and tell Dad about it.
I was fixing to say, when we finally leave here, Matt, bring your instruments with you. But you don't have to give Jason them any instrument. They don't need that.
Yeah, that's good. Very, very, very good advice, Phil.
Good advice.
So my daughter says the band is called Third Day. They're awesome. So I come home and Missy said, Mia just discovered Third Day. She's a little late to the party. And
A little bit
"Are you
late.
kidding
The
me?
band has been The band's been broken up for 6 years now, and she's just now figuring it out.
It's just like our show because like I do events now and these kids come up and they're like, the parents will say, yeah, they just started watching Duck Dynasty. And I'm like, well, we've been off the air for 7 years. But what happens is when the stuff is good, like what you guys did, like our show, when stuff is good, like, and I mentioned Barney Fife, when it's, Mayberry and,
Right.
Andy Griffith's show, it can play into generation after generation after generation. And that's the beauty of doing all what we've done for the kingdom is, man, that stuff pays forward. It's going to go generationally, which is a blessing.
We just went on vacation with right when the hurricane hit. We were in Hilton Head, South Carolina. So we're going through the night when the hurricane comes through. It didn't get really close to us, but it was 70 mile an hour gust on the beach, and the house is just shaking the whole time. But one of the friends, my youngest son, brought a friend with him, and his name is Brady. So shout out to Brady. He listens to y'all and loves Duck Dynasty. So the whole week he's carrying around, he got an Uncle Si sweet tea cup, and he's drinking he drank 2 gallons of sweet tea in 4 days.
Ooh.
Oh, my goodness.
And I saw him yesterday, and I said, hey, Brady, you're never going to guess what I'm doing tomorrow. He said, what? I said, I'm going to be on the Unashamed podcast. And y'all, I have won Grammys. I have won Dove Awards. I've met presidents. I've done all kinds of stuff. You would have thought it was just the end all be all that I'm going to be with y'all on the podcast.
You finally arrived, man.
Finally made it, y'all. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I did want to say there's something about longevity, and because like a lot of people's perception of us, they only got from our Duck show. And so, like most reality shows, they figured that this was going to be a crash and burn type thing they could follow on the internet, after it was so successful. And I think it surprised people that, well, wait a minute, they're still here, they're still doing things. Of course, they figured it out that, we've got power on loan from a lot more incredible source, and our faith on Jesus.
We weren't just Kardashians with beards, Jay. So that's what you're trying to say.
We have a greater purpose in work. It's called the kingdom of God. And so
Praise the Lord.
I feel that same vibe with you. I read an interesting quote, and I was just looking at some of the things you've been doing. But in an interview, I saw that you said that you had considered yourself a babe in Christ for years when you were starting out. And I wanted to get into that, just with your life and your ministry. And because at some point, you did kind of have that catalyst of maturity. And, because I don't know how long you've been doing this, so I thought you could talk about that a little bit with where you started and where you've come and the maturity.
Well, yeah, I grew up in church, and in fact, when we talked about Clanton, Alabama earlier, where I'm from, I was from 20 minutes outside of Clanton, so I grew up on a dirt road, just kind of in the middle of nowhere. I went to Providence Baptist Church number 2. I have no idea where the first one was. I'm not making it up. I'm not making it
name
up.
of all times.
It was almost
Baptist Church
Providence,
number
but
2.
number 2.
So I grew up there. That's where my dad went to church when he grew up. And, it's the kind of place that if it's 100 people in there, that's packed out for Christmas and Easter. Real small Baptist church. and got saved at an early age. I mean, I gave my life. I heard the simple gospel message, the good news, one Sunday morning, that we're all sinners, that the only way we can be saved is through Jesus and him dying on a cross for us and us receiving that free gift. I realized at 8, 9 years old, I was never going to be good enough. I was never going to earn my way to heaven. I was never going to give enough money to charity. I was never going to read the word of God enough. I was never going to pray enough. And that is good news, that I don't have to earn it, that Jesus paid that price for me. And so I got up by myself, walked the aisle, went to the preacher and said, I want this. Got baptized the next week. And I'd like to tell you that everything was great from then on, but I just remained a baby Christian for a long time. Just kind of did my thing. It was kind of that, we call it fire insurance. Everybody in the church that I went to went, oh, you came forward, you got baptized, you're good. And there was no discipleship. Now, I'm not blaming that on other people. It's, partly my fault too, but I was a kid. Yeah. And my dad didn't go to church with us, and mama did what she could. But finally, I still was going to church. And then, I'd get re-saved every other year at church camp, stuff like that. And then my senior year of high school, I was scared to death, because I didn't have any real skills to get a real job after I graduated. I wasn't a great student. We didn't really have money for me to go to college anyway. And I'm just sitting on into my bed, just actually praying for the first time in a while, going, Lord, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm scared. And I remember somebody had said, at church, they said, you should read the book of Romans. So I went and I got the dust off of my Bible, and I didn't even know where Romans was. I had to look down the index, I said, Romans, New Testament. All right, turn there. Started reading, and God's Spirit just filled me and reminded me of that promise that I made when I was a child to surrender to Jesus, and I realized I wasn't surrendered completely to him. And right then and there, I said, Lord, I need you. I'm giving everything to you. And I was in a little garage band. I'd always wanted to be in a rock band my whole life. My mom and dad sang and played guitar, nothing professional, but just always around the house. And I was in this garage band, and I gave my life to the Lord, and I felt like he said, hey, I want you to give up that band. And we were starting to do shows outside of the state and getting a little bit of, getting some gigs. And I thought, Lord, I've always wanted to do this, always wanted this. Now I've got it, and you're asking me to give it up. And he said, yep. And I said, you know what? I surrender to you, so I'm surrendering this to you. And I went to the guy that had started the band with me in high school, and I said, hey, I'm going to quit the band. He said, why? And I said, well, I'm giving my life to Jesus. I've been hanging out in places I don't need to hang out. I've been singing about things I don't want to sing about anymore. And the Lord is telling me to quit, so I'm just done. And he said, well, let's start a Christian band. He had grown up in church, and he knew about Christian music. I didn't know anything about it. Only Christian music I knew was singing hymns out of the Red Book. Yeah. And he started playing some Christian music for me, and I went, it was like modern rock music with gospel message, and I just couldn't believe it. I just thought, I had no idea this was a thing. And so I said, I want to do this. And the Lord took me, just, skinny, dumb 18-year-old kid, and started this thing. That garage band became what was known as Third Day. Wow. And, we never knew we would have the success that we had. We thought if we get to make a couple of records and cross the U.S. a couple of times, that'd be awesome. Then we'll go get real jobs after that. Yeah. And there ain't nothing else I know how to do. So, and I still love doing it.
Yeah, it really is. Well, I also wanted to ask you about, because, if you Google Mac's family, it's more like a lot of our family. It looks like the United Nations. Yeah. And so I know, the power of adoption, especially when you think about, the Bible and how that compares to how God views us, in Christ. And because you've always come across as a family man and with your kids, and I know your wife had a health scare. What was that, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, 4 years ago.
Yeah, and so I wanted you to share about that and how that's grown your faith.
Yeah, well, Amy and I, we dated in high school, and she was what I would not recommend to anybody else, but she was missionary dating me because, as I told you, I wasn't living for the Lord at the time, but she was really strong in her faith, started inviting me back to church, giving me some Christian music to listen to, just to encourage me. And once I surrendered completely to the Lord, we worked at our church in an after-school program. And it was like you just said, it was a United Nations of little kids there. It was Asian, Black, white, Hispanic kids, and it was a beautiful thing. And we just thought, once you get to a point when you're dating for a while, you start asking those questions. Would you like to have kids? All those things. And so we always talked about, we would love to adopt. We would love for our family to look very different than normal, to show that that's what heaven's going to be like.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to be a little surprised when they get to heaven to see what it really looks like and who's there and who's not.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had 3 biological children. And when it got to the point, we started talking about having another child. We said, well, we always talked about when we were younger about adopting. And so we went through, we had some good friends that had adopted the Nasser family. David Nasser, who's a speaker y'all probably run into before. Yeah. They adopted a little boy from Guatemala. And we saw just the faith and the hope and the love that adoption, brought about in their family. And we saw it as a beautiful thing. Of course, you read Ephesians chapter 1, how God adopts us into his family. We thought, how can we not do this? And so, and it was a beautiful thing. And then less than a year later, we get a call in the middle of the night about this little girl that was going to be born. They had no idea where she was going to go live. And we said, well, we got a baby already. And 3 other kids. But I don't know if we can do this. And then we went and saw her in the hospital and just knew right away. We saw her and said, that's our baby girl. And we brought her home that day. So we went from 3 to 5 in a matter of a year. And it's been awesome.
Which is we talk a lot on here, Mac, about being pro-life, and it's more than just the womb, right? It's all the way through, raising a child and everybody having an opportunity to really share that and show that. So I love it when I hear stories like that, because it really is the idea that we're trying to bless people from womb to tomb, and be able to show them Jesus, which is fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when you told your story about meeting your wife, isn't that something how even from the beginning, going back to the garden, I mean, God has the opposite sex for us to complete us. I mean, even with my wife, who, if I would have written down, okay, how this is going to work because of all these things we have in common, I just wouldn't have been able to fill that out. But, only our relationship in the Lord is what we had in common at the time. And now I look back on it and thank God, thinking, genius, this was the perfect. But it's so hard to see it in the moment. And that's why I wanted to kind of go through your life, because in all these instances, you see God working his plan, in your life. And I do.
No doubt about it.
I do think that's why the longevity is there. And there's a piece, every time I see you and the new projects that you're doing, and Life After Third Day, and even with us, Life After our Duck show, God continues to use us as we mature in the faith and, and get older. And I just think it's a powerful testimony to how God works.
Yeah. I think about Moses. There are times when I get older and a lot more gray's coming through and I go, oh Lord, am I done? But Moses had 3 different lives, basically. If you think about it, he lived to 120. Now, I'm not going to live to 120, but from when he was born till he was 40, he was a prince of Egypt. So he's got the best of everything, best of food, best of places to live, education, all that stuff. Yep. But God was working in his life at that time, even though Moses had no idea. He was preparing Moses for something bigger and better than being a prince of Egypt. So his second part of his life was 40 to 80. Now he goes like the almost the opposite. He thinks, man, I had the best, and now I've got the hardest that anybody can. I'm living in a desert. Yep. Being a nomad. But at the same time, Moses, everybody else would look at his life at that time and go, man, that's terrible. But Moses was actually learning even more. And he married his wife, and he had his children and had his family. And then he came to faith. And then from 80 to 120, think about this now, 80 to the next third, the last third of his life, even though God was preparing him the whole time and helping him to get trained and ready for what God was going to do, it wasn't until the last part of his life did God go, now you're ready. And so that story of Moses so encourages me to go that there is no retirement in the scriptures.
That's right.
Now, don't get me wrong. There are times of rest. We have to, that's a biblical thing. But there is no retirement when it comes to faith, when it comes to our relationship with God. And so anybody out there listening now or seeing this podcast, do not think that God is done with you. He is never done with us, and he always has something else around the corner.
Yeah, that reminds me of that conversation they had, which I've actually pitched this to numerous songwriters and musicians to do a song. So I'm giving you a heads up here. This
all right.
This
Here's
could
the
turn
Just
James
want to
Pitch.
co-write. He want to co-write.
Yeah, let's do some songwriting. Look, there's a conversation when right at the first Moses said, "Well, who am I?" And God said to him, "I am who I am." And it, when you think about that, I always thought that was fascinating because we all feel that way. Well, who am I that you could use me? And he responds back, "I am who," which is the reverse order of what he just
dates
said.
back to Ada. This is of all places Genesis chapter 4.
I feel a jubal
there you are.
coming on. Come on.
Ada
Let's go.
gave birth
Let's go.
to Jabal. He was the father of all those who live in tents and raise livestock. We've seen them. His brothers, named Jubal, was the father of all who play the harp and flute.
That's old Mac.
That's where a man comes in.
Well, now you got he just did your
way back.
This is
You don't need
ancestry.
DNAs. You got it right there.
Jubilee. That's where we get the word Jubilee from.
Jubilee.
That's it.
Exactly. Well, look, tell us what we can do in the short term to get the album and to experience the Awakening Tour.
Yeah, absolutely. So Awakening Tour will go all the way through the end of October. And then I'm on a tour with Danny Goki and Tasha Layton and Seth Schleter that starts in all of November. So the simple thing is go to macpowell.com. It's got all the touring dates. The record, wherever you stream music, go check out the record from Mac Powell, I Love Jesus. There's 4 songs that have been released so far. The rest will get released October 25th. And then if anybody's interested in getting signed copies and a vinyl, CDs or whatever, all that stuff's at macpowell.com.
Well, Mac, it's always a blessing to get to spend time with you. You did one of our cruises back in the day.
That's right.
And did worship.
And
survived. 3,000 crazy Duck Dynasty fans, which, by the way.
That cruise was easy for me because everybody's looking for y'all, man. I got to get, I got to sneak around.
Mac, I don't know if you knew this or not, and you may have, but about 300 plus people were baptized on that cruise. And as far as we know, it's the first time they ever baptized people on a Carnival cruise. So there's been a few drunks fall in the pool, but we actually baptized them on purpose. So you were a part of that as well. Max, always a pleasure, brother. Well, we won't go this long without having you back on sometime again.
I appreciate y'all. Thanks for what y'all are doing. Thanks for getting the word out there and pointing people to Jesus.
Thank you, brother.
Amen.
Mac Powell, everybody. Check him out.
See y'all.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.